6 cognitive shifts for confidence. There's a particular kind of discomfort that happens right before you speak. Not stage fright, exactly. Something quieter. A half-second pause where you scan the room, measure yourself against it, and somewhere deep in the back of your mind, decide whether you belong there or not. Most people push through it and say nothing. They assume it's nerves. They assume everyone else feels exactly the same way, moves on just as fast. But some people can't shake it. The pause becomes a pattern. The hesitation becomes a habit. And after enough time, they stop thinking of it as something situational and start thinking of it as something personal, as if the discomfort is describing them rather than just something that's happening to them. If you've ever walked away from a conversation wishing you had said something differently, if you've ever rehearsed a point 3 times in your head before saying it out loud, if there are rooms you quietly avoid because something about them makes you feel slightly smaller than you know you are, this is for you. And the first thing worth saying is, what you've been carrying isn't a character flaw, it's a pattern, and patterns have explanations. What we're really talking about here is confidence, not the performed version, not the loudness, not the certainty, not the person who takes up space without apology. That version of confidence is often just extroversion in a good mood. What we're talking about is something more structural, the way you hold yourself in uncertainty, the way your brain decides in real time whether a situation is safe or threatening. That is what confidence actually is, and almost nobody explains it this way. Here's what the neuroscience actually shows. Confidence isn't a personality trait you're born with or without. It's a predictive process. Your brain is constantly running simulations, comparing the current moment to a library of past experiences and generating predictions about what will happen next. When you walk into a room and feel unsure, that uncertainty isn't weakness. It's your brain running out of good data. It's encountering a context that its past experiences haven't mapped cleanly, and instead of proceeding, it flags the situation as ambiguous. Research on interoception, the brain's awareness of the body's internal states, shows that people with lower confidence aren't less capable, they're more sensitive. They register more signals. Their nervous systems are picking up more information than average, which is genuinely useful in many contexts, but overwhelming in social ones. The brain treats all of that signal as noise and responds with hesitation. It feels like doubt, but it's actually vigilance. And vigilance, like most things, has a history. For a lot of people, the roots of this pattern go back further than they think. Environments where being right mattered more than being heard. Homes where emotions were unpredictable, where the consequences of speaking up were hard to read in advance. Classrooms where being wrong meant something social, not just academic. The nervous system learns its posture early. It learns to wait, to check, to measure the room before committing to it. And what begins as an intelligent adaptation, a way of staying safe, eventually becomes reflexive. You're no longer in that environment, but your brain is still running its protocols. This isn't a flaw in the system. It's exactly what the system was designed to do. The nervous system doesn't distinguish between then and now unless it's specifically taught to. And this is important because none of this is a verdict. Some people grew up in environments that reinforced bold action, where failure had no social cost, where risk-taking was modeled and rewarded. They tend to move through the world differently, not more intelligently, not more deserving, just trained in a different set of reflexes. Neither configuration is superior, they're just different starting conditions. Now here's where it gets interesting, and maybe a little counterintuitive. The cognitive shifts that actually change confidence, and there are 6 distinct ones, don't work by convincing you that you're better than you think. That approach fails almost every time, because the brain is skeptical of claims that don't match its own data. You can't talk yourself into confidence by repeating affirmations your nervous system doesn't believe. What actually works is quieter. It's more like adjusting the lens. The first shift is moving from outcome-focused to process-focused. Confident people aren't less concerned with results. They're just not measuring themselves against results in real time. They've learned to separate what they do from what happens next, because what happens next involves too many variables outside their control. The second shift is about prediction. When the brain expects discomfort, it braces for it, which makes the discomfort worse and confirms the original fear. The shift is learning to let predictions be hypotheses instead of certainties, not arguing with them, just holding them more loosely. The third is reattribution. The physical experience of anxiety, heart rate, muscle tension, altered breathing, is nearly identical to the physical experience of excitement. The difference is entirely in how the brain labels it. Research from Harvard has shown that people who reframe that arousal as readiness rather than threat actually perform measurably better. The body is doing the same thing, the interpretation is what changes. The fourth is relational, recognizing that confidence is contagious in both directions. The version of yourself that's hesitant tends to pull back, which reads socially as disinterest or coldness, which causes other people to pull back, which confirms your original fear that the room wasn't safe. The inverse is also true. Small acts of engagement trigger reciprocal engagement. The brain updates its safety predictions based on evidence it collects in real time. The fifth is about value versus validation. A lot of hesitation is rooted in an implicit question: will this be received well? That question places your confidence in the hands of the response, which is inherently unstable. The shift is anchoring in what you're actually offering, the thought, the observation, the perspective, independent of how it lands. That's not indifference, it's integrity. And the sixth, the one people underestimate the most, is consistency over intensity. Confidence doesn't build through single moments of bravery. It builds through repetition, through accumulated evidence that the room didn't swallow you whole, that you spoke and nothing irreversible happened, that uncertainty is livable. Every small act of engagement rewrites the prediction file. Over time, the brain stops flagging familiar contexts as ambiguous. It finds its footing. None of these shifts require you to become a different person. That's the thing. Confidence isn't about performing certainty. It's about updating the story your nervous system tells about what's possible. You were never the problem. You were always just running on older data. If something in here felt true, if there was a moment where it described something you've been carrying but never quite had language for, there's more. The psychology of how people with high sensitivity navigate social environments, how self-perception updates and resists updating, and what it actually means to take up space without apology. Not as advice, just as explanation, because the more clearly you see the pattern, the less power it has to run quietly in the background.